Hey Elsa, it's Miss Shoddery. Today's lesson is on the ethical care of animals. So we're kind of starting to wrap up the end of this unit. When it comes to animals and their relationships, interactions with humans, there are really two big schools of thought. So there is the thought of animal welfare, and there's the thought of animal rights. And these two groups within them have lots of different delineations, lots of different extremes to which people fall under one of these opinions. But generally, these are the two overarching ideas. So, animal welfare, as defined by the group called the American Veterinary Medical Association, is the human responsibility that encompasses all aspects of animal well being, including proper housing, management, disease prevention and treatment, responsible care, humane handling, and humane euthanasia. Basically, this idea means that humans work with animals, humans have animals, we consume animals and their products, and that's okay. But if we're going to do that, we should treat those animals well. Like we can use them, we can interact with them, but it's our duty because they're providing us benefits and joy that we should give them the best care that we can, make sure that we're meeting their needs, and that, even when it comes to deciding if that animal needs to pass on, either due to health or because we're going to use it for our products, like its meat, that we should do that in a way that is caring and does not cause them extended pain. Okay, so that's animal welfare. We can use animals, but we should treat them well while they're providing benefits for us. The other big school of thought is animal rights. And so, animal rights is defined as a philosophical view that animals have rights similar or the same as humans. A true animal rights proponents believe that animals do not have the that humans do not have the right to use animals. Animal rights proponents wish to generally ban the use of animals by humans. So they believe that animals are living creatures the same as we are, and because they are living creatures the same as we are, they should have the same rights as us. Again, within these two areas, there are lots of different levels of how strongly or how much you believe in different ideals, but these are the two general ideas. We are going to focus on animal welfare, obviously, because we are talking about animal uses and animal benefits and our relationship with them. So, everything that we focus on is really about how to use animals, but use them responsibly. So, ethical care. Okay. So, first of all, ethical care is a big topic. So, who really decides what that means? The fact of the matter is, there's lots of people and lots of groups involved in making those decisions. Governments play a role in that, animal welfare and animal rights organizations play a role in that, animal shelters and humane societies, um, groups like rescue groups help to decide that. Producers like farmers have a voice in that. Owners of animals have a voice in that. There's lots of organizations and lots of individuals that are part of that conversation of what does it look like. In animal science, uh, we talk a lot about Temple Grandin. If you don't know who Temple Grandin is, she is a professor in Colorado, but she's also a huge advocate for animal welfare. And she's an individual who, in the United States and the world, has had a lot of say in what animal welfare should look like and should be, which is super cool and interesting to learn about. And if you don't know about Temple Grandin, I encourage you to learn more. She is an autistic individual who is actually able to use her autism because of the way that she sees the world. She has a really good perspective on how animals view the world. And that's helped her to be a huge pioneer for improving animal welfare across the world. A lot of the ways that we handle cattle, especially in the United States, are based off of her principles and her design. Another big group in the United States that plays a role in helping to kind of define what animal welfare should be is the AVMA, again, the Veterinary Medical Association. And their information is what most of this presentation is based on. So, there are a couple of major laws that kind of define what is legal in the United States in regards to animal welfare. And so the big federal laws or the big national government laws are the Animal Welfare Act of 1966, the Humane Slaughter Act that was written originally in 1958 and then revised in 1978. Again, a lot because of Temple Grandin. And then the Preventing Animal Cruelty and Torture Act of 2019, that's much more recent and much more all encompassing, which really focuses on, again, not torture and not cruelty, and also what we call the interstate commerce of animals. So, like the trading of animals across state lines, especially animals that shouldn't be kept as pets, non domesticated animals. While these laws are really important and they help to establish protocols, they are national laws. And so they don't necessarily play a role in most people's day to day interactions with animals because the way that federal laws get enforced is a little bit different in some cases. And so, really, states have a lot of control of those laws. And most animal welfare laws are really enforced at the state and local level, not at the national level. So, for example, a lot of states in the last couple of years have started to look more at the declawing of cats. And there are actually a couple of states and cities, more cities, we're moving to more states that have actually banned the practice of declawing cats. Because if you didn't know, when we declaw cats, it's not like we're just clipping their nails out, we're actually literally cutting off the first part of their toe. So it kind of be the same as like amputating your finger right at that first bend. So there's lots of states that have started to outlaw that practice because it causes a lot of pain and discomfort to the cats. And that's more, again, of a city or a state level law. So that's where most of the violations are taken care of. So when we talk about welfare, when we talk about ethical animal care, there's this idea of a duty of care. And this phrase should sound familiar because we talked about a duty of care when we talked about board of directors and businesses. But it's basically this idea that because we are owning these animals, because they are our pets or they are our producers, because we own them, we have this duty, this responsibility to ensure that they're being well cared for, to ensure that they're being getting their basic needs met, to make sure that they're happy, healthy, and well cared for as long as they are in our possession. So we have that duty of care. Okay, we should have and feel that responsibility. So what does that entail? The American Veterinary Medical Association really identifies themselves 8 principles that examine different aspects of care and use. And it talks about things from a pet owner standpoint, but also a production standpoint on farms, ranches, etc. Okay? Within those 8 principles, there are really 4 big ideas about providing care. And then the different principles look at different situations in which those would come up. So the first one is food and water. All animals have to be given not only enough food and water, but they should also be given the right kinds of food and water in order to meet their needs. In animal science, actually, right now, we're learning about all of the different things that foods do for an animal and the different like balances of their diet that we can give them, and how it's not just about getting enough food, it's about getting the right kinds. So, one of our duties of care is to make sure that any animals in our possession, under our control, have constant access to good food and water to meet all of their day to day needs in any situation, whether that's the middle of winter when it's super cold, you still got to get out there and make sure the animals have water, or whether that's in the middle of the summer when it's really hot and their water's drying up and being used really quickly because they're drinking more of it. Next, we have healthcare. Now, healthcare looks like a lot of different things. There are certainly things that can additionally be done to provide extra care. But at the base minimum, like if an animal's sick, it's our duty to make sure that they get better. Not to let them sit, not to let them suffer, but to provide some kind of intervention or treatment so that they're not sitting there miserable or hurting or potentially dying when there's something that we could do about it. When it comes to pets, there is, I should say, pets and production animals, all animals that we have in our care, there is a hard balance when it comes to healthcare. Okay, where's the balance of what can reasonably be done, keep this animal comfortable, and where is the price point that it's too expensive to fix that we just can't. We talk about, I think we've talked about this a little bit, and I know we talk about it in some of our other classes too. But if you've got an animal, for example, that has cancer, Okay, you can potentially make that animal better, but sometimes that cost of treatment is really high. And so part of healthcare also looks at when is euthanasia the appropriate answer? When is it acceptable that, you know what, we just can't care for this animal? It's not going to be effective or it's going to make the animal more miserable. And so we kind of have to make that decision. It's a little harder, I think, when it comes to healthcare with animals because there is that line of the amount that it costs versus how much we can reasonably provide. And that's up to every individual to make that decision based on their own situation, circumstances, the animal itself. But in general, it is our job to provide some form of healthcare when animals are sick. Now, lots of pet owners and producers will also invest in preventative care. Preventative care, like vaccines and treatments like that, aren't necessary. Like they don't legally have to provide most of those. There are some you do. But in and of itself, like vaccines are not required by law, but they are good practice. Now, there are some exceptions. If your animal is being boarded, if it's being transported, there are some like vaccines and health preventatives that are mandatory. Rabies is a big one. Like you can't keep your dog in a kennel if it doesn't have a rabies vaccine. And that also comes with the idea of human health too, because some of those diseases are what we call zoonotic, and so they can spread from one species of animal to another, and from animals to humans, and then from humans potentially back to animals. And so that's more of a greater health and safety, not just the individual animal, but like the population as a whole. Next is suitable environment. Suitable environment means that an animal needs to not only be in an environment that's like a large enough size for it, but also meets again its needs and is clean and safe. Okay? So you can see here this is a picture of a goat farm of some kind. I definitely looked for sheep, and this came up under sheep. These are not sheep; they're goats. But you can see like they have space to move around. They have other animals with them to provide companionship and company. You can see that they've got food out in different places. So they have a suitable environment for them. They're in an enclosed space. It looks like there's some snow outside, so it's probably not a good time for them to be out. You can kind of see out the windows. So this is providing them with shelter and care. Okay, we want to make sure that they're getting that environment that they need, that they're not overly crowded, and that they can access exercise, space to walk, roam. The last one then is consideration for typical behavior in biology. Okay, so one of the other aspects of ethical care is that we think about the animals themselves. What are their needs? What behaviors do they engage in? What biological like imperatives might they have? And how do we still allow them to get those things met. So in our pictures, we've got number one, we have a cat with a nice scratching post, a really fancy scratching post. But cats, because of their behaviors, they're used to scratching. It's part of their ability to communicate with other animals. And so providing some outlets for them to do that safely is important to their typical behaviors. On the other picture, we've got a dog being all snuggled up. Companionship is part of this as well. So animals that are meant to be in groups that have that, you know, we talked about social hierarchy. They have those needs for companionship and that social hierarchy. We're providing some outlet for that as well. This also goes into things like mental stimulation, providing toy access and things like that. Keep animals mentally engaged. Okay, so those are the four big things. The hardest part about talking about ethical care is that ethical care can look very different. Every individual animal, how they're being used, what their role is within a family or a production facility can all make what's ethical care for them a little bit different. And so it's really hard to establish like clear cut laws about, well, it needs to be this because that might not make sense in every situation. How you think about something like a working dog that's working to provide, who's working to check or watch for seizures in their owner, what their day to day looks like as far as work and play and mental stimulation and things might look very different than like my couch potato cat who's just kind of hanging out and being a companion. Okay. So when we look at laws, when we look at, you know, what is and isn't okay, that can shift really dramatically. There are some big conversations in the agriculture world about things like farrowing crates for swine. So farrowing crates are a thing that have historically been used with raising pigs because sows or mother pigs are pretty large. And so they can sometimes lay on and crush their babies without realizing it. And so farrowing crates were developed in order to keep some separation between the mother and her piglets, keep them protected. And so for a period of time where those piglets are small, the mother is pretty confined most of the day. She's not, getting to get up and walk around a lot because we're trying to also keep our piglets safe. So that looks different than we would think maybe was acceptable for another animal. Okay. Again, at the end of the day, it's all about that idea of duty of care. Okay? How are we being responsible and how are we doing the right thing for animals and not just people? Okay. How do we take care of them for their own sake and for their right to be healthy and well and treated well? Okay. So we got to understand that. But again, it also goes back to understanding some of the practices and why they're done. So I mentioned things like farrowing crates. Okay, they might not look like best practice from the outside in, but there are some reasons that we do those things or we use some of those raising techniques that go back to the overall health and welfare of all of the animals. So again, they're big questions. They're hard sometimes to answer. There's not always a clear cut solution. But if you're always thinking about like what's the right thing to do, that usually gets us to a place where animals are being well taken care of and kept safe and healthy. So, if you have any other questions about that, please feel free to let me know. Otherwise, credits to did I put on my hair? I did not. Again, the American Veterinary Medical Association, and also, ironically, the Victorian government in England, one of the areas of England that had some really good resources too. So, if you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, take care, guys. Miss you. Hope you're all well.